The Haunted House by Max. The house was small. It was haunted. The setting takes place in an open space. He thinks everything is haunted, so he runs as fast as he can. Then the people said to stop. They talked. Now he thinks nothing is haunted. Now he is friends with everybody. It was a dark and frosty night in Helmer, Idaho. John was out behind his property exploring the woods. John was 8 years old and had the curiosity of a cat. He and his family had just moved into a new house on the far east side of Helmer. Their house was overlooking a valley with a river gently flowing through it. Behind the house was a massive amount of trees that led up a hill into the woods. John was not afraid of anything. He had taken a stick with a duct tape tip as a weapon. It was about 2 hours into John's adventure when he came upon a funny-looking tree that tangled itself into an old redwood with an old scratched-out address. John came to a halt. He approached the sign with caution and carefully examined it. John reads out loud, 138, forget it. He dropped the sign and started to inspect the surrounding area. He quickly finding an old trail that was buried underneath grass and blackberry bushes. John began down the road with his stick tightly clenched. The road took two bends and led straight up to an old mansion. John stared in awe. The house stood towering over the trees, the old broken windows screaming, "Stay away." He started slowly toward the house, slowly seeing more clear, the paint shedding off the house like a snake. There was a long walkway leading around the side of the house to the front door. John takes his first step haphazardly, the step barely to withstand the weight, creaking and cracking with every shift of movement. He moves his left foot to the next step with a more gentle and cautious swift movement. The nails that keep the step intact, rubbing and squeaking as he passes step by step. Finally making it to the door, John grabbed the doorknob and knocked. Knock, 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 knock. John didn't hear anything inside. Then he knocked again. Knock, 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 knock. After a couple minutes of knocking without a response, he reached towards the doorknob and slowly turned it left, listening to the old metal breaking its eroded layer of metal away. John shoved the door open. "Hello? Hello?" No response. The front door opened up into a small hallway that bends slightly right and disappears behind a corner. John creeped away from the door and down the dark hallway. As John rounds the corner, he stops in his tracks. The sound of a piano is coming from below him. John looked around the room for any sign of stairs, but he could not locate any. The piano sound grew louder and louder as John scraped through the living room, the floor creaking like an old house should. One piece of flooring had cracked, leaving a loud snap. The piano had stopped completely. John started to get tingles running through his body, his adrenaline pumping through his veins. The sound of the door slamming shut echoed through the old mansion. He sprinted back into the dark hallway towards the door, turning the corner, but the door had been closed. Trying to pull it open, but it was stuck, as if it were glued shut. John, starting to freak out, looks to his left and finds a pan from the kitchen and throws it through the window. John dove through the window, not caring about cutting himself, and ran back into the woods. The next morning, John woke up earlier than usual. He went downstairs and told his mom that he wanted to go on another adventure. She looked at him with curiosity and asked, "Why are you up so early?" John turned to look at her and simply said, "It's adventure time." At that moment, John got up and booked it to the door. She quickly stopped him and said, "What's the rush, little bud?" He didn't want to tell her about the mansion, knowing she wouldn't let him go. "I found a really cool crick." "Crick, you say?" "Yeah, really cool. It falls behind the north side of the woods." After a while of convincing her to let him go, he ran outside and grabbed his duct tape stick, and it was on his way back into the woods. John approached the address sign again and was frightened to find out that the address had been taken and the road recovered by bushes and branches. There were three people sitting behind the tree where the address was. They didn't want to be seen. John walked over to the tree and said, "Hello?" The people slowly came around the tree and stood there staring at John. They stood about 6 feet tall each at least, wearing what looked like cut-in-half potato sacks as capes, wearing old ripped-up Nikes with dirt-stained white socks. They asked John if he had been inside the house. He replied, "Yeah, that place is haunted." They shook their heads in disagreement. "The house is not haunted. Trust us." As they started to walk away, they said to never come back. John waited it out for about 2.5 hours. He then snuck out behind the mansion and attempted to scale the side wall onto the bathroom roof. He ran and jumped onto the side of the wall and put his left foot on the wall, jumped, and then snapped his leg back to spring himself onto the roof. However, missed the roof by only inches and fell to the ground, leaving a loud crash. He got up in a hurry, hoping that no one had heard the noise that he had just caused. Getting eye level with the lower living room windows, trying to see anything inside the house. Nothing was to be seen. John took a couple steps back and tried the parkour again. This attempt was successful. He jumped to the next level of the roof, trying to be as quiet as possible. The old roof creaking and cracking with every shift of weight. Every noise that John made freaked him out more and more. John got to a sunlight that was located at the highest point of the roof. He poked his head through the little hatch and saw that he was above the where he had gotten before when he was inside the house. John watched from the sunlight for a while, closely watching the inside for movement or sign of life. After about 45 minutes of watching and actually seeing nothing, John was about to get up and call it quit for the day. When John was getting up, he slipped and face-planted into the sunlight glass. At that moment, when he hit the glass, he saw 3 shadows running across the living room, disappearing around the corner inside. John got up, ran across the roof, jumped off the top onto the bathroom roof, and jumped into the grass, rolling a couple times, getting into a full-out sprint into the woods, not caring to look behind him at the horrors he had just seen. John ran for a good 5 minutes and then jumped behind a tree, looking around it, trying to see if he was being chased. No one appeared to be there. Trying to catch his breath after that rush, he heard rustling in the bushes not 20 feet away from him. He got up and ready to fight or flight. The 3 people that warned him before came out of the brush. John ran over to them, insisting that the house was haunted and evil things happened there. They were tired of hearing that story, and when they finally said, "Follow us and learn, young one," John did as told and followed them, heading the direction back to the house. He couldn't help but ask as many questions as he could. "Who are you guys? What is that house?" The only reply he ever got was, "Shh, young one." John finally became silent, walking towards the house. They seemed to be in a hurry because they shuffled their feet way faster than John did. They were gaining ground on him. He sped up, trying to keep up with these strangers. They found the road in no time at all, and John asked, "What are you guys doing? This place is a bad place." They laughed without saying anything. Soon they came upon the house and walked right up to the front door and knocked. John, wanting to run away, was being held tightly by one other person. The door swung open, and all of them walked right in. The door slammed shut and gave John the shivers as it did. They walked into the living room and told him to sit on the couch. John sat down and looked up at the skylight that he was just looking through earlier. He heard footsteps coming from below the wood, with wood creaking as it got closer. "Hello, John." John didn't recognize the man. "How do you know my name?" John asked. The man slowly walked around the couch and sat across from John in the other chair. Looked up at John and said, "My name is Name, but spelled backwards." "Em?" "Correct," E-Man said. "I know everything of everything in the whole wide world," Eon said calmly. John, in awe, asked, "Wait, seriously?" "Yes, anything and everything you want or need to know, I can tell you," replied E-Man. John became ecstatic and got up, jumping and spouting all these questions. Eon quickly stopped him and said, "Whoa, youngin'. Calm. With knowledge comes great responsibility." "Oh, wow, really?" asked John. "Over time, you will learn. That I promise." And John and Eon were best friends forever.